court dealing with these matters.
Okay, and the juveniles, are those hearings open to the public?
They're not. They're closed hearings. All of these are protected. All the juvenile matters are protected. And there's a couple others, too. We also have a youth shelter as well as a detention center. Runaways, for example, truants, we sometimes get involved with them. Sometimes they have to be placed, because they have no other place to go, in the youth shelter, which is owned by the county and operated by the county. And these are kids that have a problem, and they don't have an appropriate home to go to on a temporary basis. So the juvenile system also includes those people. They've committed no crime, but they could be a runaway or have no home at the moment.
And are the juveniles represented by lawyers, or are there advocates for the juveniles? How do they get through the system?
It works the same way pretty much as an adult. If the crime is serious enough and the income is low enough, there's an appointed counsel. Everybody has the right to an attorney. Some elect not to do that, but just like the adults, if the crime is serious enough, there's a mandatory attorney. So it's very similar to the adult process.
Now, one of the areas in family court that I'm told is the favorite of the judges is adoptions. You feel that way?
Oh, I think everybody does, because there's never, almost never an unpleasant adoption. It's always a pleasant day.
All right, and could you just briefly describe the process of adoption?
Sure. Well, the papers are handled, most of the adoptions come through an agency. The actual process that a judge goes through is simply a hearing, usually on Fridays, and they'll hear from the parents. There's usually an agency recommendation as well as other reports that might come in. And these are kids whose parents, for example, have had their rights terminated by virtue of a DIFUS removal. They're kids who have no parents at the moment. And often they've been living with with the adoptive parents. And it's a pretty simple process by the time it gets to the judge. And people tend to bring cameras and take pictures. But the principal role of the judge is to make sure, yes, the parents really understand that they are now accepting this child as their own, fully with the right of inheritance, for example, and that the parents are appropriate and reasonable for this child.
Yeah, in fact, on Fridays when I'm walking through the courthouse in the hallways, you'll see the parents, their relatives, the little children are dressed in their Sunday best, and everybody's taking pictures.
Right.
You know, it's a pretty nice thing. On the other spectrum, paternity. Those cases are also handled in the family court as well, right?
They are.
And but do you see a lot of paternity actions?
Not really. Probably some more in dissolution than we do in, I'm sorry, in non-dissolution than we do in dissolution, but we really don't. With blood tests, etc., it's really pretty straightforward nowadays.
Okay, one of the other areas is interstate support, right? That's a pretty complex
It is very
system.
much so.
There's a uniform law that applies to all the states that are signatories to it, and all
Correct.
the states are, and it deals with one person in one state asking another state to create a support obligation and to enforce it. Right? How does a family, how do you as a judge handle those types of cases?
Frankly, they don't come up too often, but when they do come up, they're handled just like in any other case. Under, I think it's the UCCJA, if I remember the initials right. If there's two courts that are involved, what you're really supposed to do is the two judges communicate with each other on the record in the presence of the parties. So if there's a situation between Pennsylvania and New Jersey, the judge from Pennsylvania and the judge from New Jersey discuss the matter on the record with the parties there. And it all depends, basically, with child support, is what's the best interest of the child, where's the home state, and they don't really get too complicated, although the interstate issues can be very complex. You're quite right.
Those issues of custody, the two judges talk and say, well, which state is more connected to this type of a case?
Correct.
Right?
Which is the home state, basically.
For the most part, yeah. And that act avoids the multiple litigations in two states that could both make orders that would conflict with each other, and then where do you go from there?
Right. That's the purpose of the Uniform Act, as you know.
Okay. One of the, I guess, most crowded dockets on Thursdays, I believe in Thursdays in Morris and Sussex, I think, domestic violence. Okay. If you describe what the domestic violence docket looks like in Morris and Sussex?
In Morris, it's principally Monday and Wednesday. We do, I think Monday, if I'm not mistaken, is municipal court TROs, and Wednesday is Superior Court TROs. Anybody has the right, 24 hours, 7 days a week, to seek a temporary restraining order if there's an act of domestic violence, which isn't just simply battery, it's harassment. There's a whole series of different criminal statutes which could qualify. And if they feel that an act has occurred, they can, during court hours, during Superior Court hours, come to the courthouse and they can be seen by a judge that day, testify pro se if they choose, most of them do, and ex parte, meaning without the other side. And if they can present a sufficient basis by which a court can conclude that there is a possibility that domestic violence has occurred, a temporary restraining order is immediately issued, the other party is served, and then a hearing date is set somewhere around 10 days ahead. And then during off hours, they can arrange to get to a local judge through the police.
And that's how it initially gets to the court.
Correct.
Right, as a complaint. And it starts with a temporary order.
Correct.
Which generally will restrain one party from having any contact from the other and restrain them from a home or an apartment.
Correct.
And then it gets to court and there's a hearing of some kind.
Correct.
Right? And what's a typical domestic, is there such a thing as a typical domestic violence case?
There really isn't a typical one. The relationships can be, for example, it can be a dating relationship, can be a husband and wife, can be a mother-daughter, can be a father-son. It has to be a family relationship. And there's really no typical. The whole concept of domestic violence is that someone is the abused party, that there's a imbalance of power, and this is an attempt to equalize the power and obviously keep someone safe, because that's what it's all about, keeping someone safe.
Now, when a person comes into domestic violence court, what type of relief are they entitled to ask for as a general rule?
Well, if they're successful in obtaining a final restraining order, which is a full litigated trial, both sides present, both sides can have attorneys, you have witnesses. Some of these trials can take half an hour, some of them can take days. And if a final restraining order is issued, that prohibits any contact between the protected party and the other side. But there's also ancillary relief can be awarded. If, for example, there's a temporary need for financial support, that can be awarded. If there's a temporary need for custody, that can be decided. And there's also an ability to decide counsel fees as well as part of damages, a different standard than under dissolution, but you can order counsel fees. And the whole purpose is to stabilize the protected party as best you can and go from there.
Now, in the domestic violence, there's also a restriction and a prohibition against possessing guns or firearms permits.
Correct.
Right? And so when there's a domestic violence complaint and a temporary restraining order, the guns get, the police or the sheriffs go to the person's home and they confiscate the guns, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit to it.